Hello, welcome to my channel. Enjoy your viewing and have a good romantic mood. The wind knocked me off my feet as I raced on my chestnut steed through the dense forest. My heart pounded like a trapped bird, and anxious thoughts swirled in my head. The message from the king that I had received that morning boded nothing good. Lady Leah, hasten to the capital, he wrote. Your presence is required to address important matters concerning the kingdom's security. I clenched my teeth. Again with these important matters. Again, I must abandon everything and rush to the capital, where only intrigues, conspiracies, and hostile glances await me. I am Leah, the daughter of Count de Montague, forced to live in the shadow of my lineage. Powerless, unrecognized, I have fought all my life for my place in this cruel world where women were but shadows of their husbands. But fate, as always, had an unexpected turn in store for me. Recently, I became the Duchess of Vauxmont-Lutisson, the mistress of an impregnable fortress standing on the border with a hostile kingdom. And beside me stood him, Lord Reynard, a fearless and strong knight whose heart was filled with darkness and pain. He saved me from certain death, but he himself was deeply wounded in soul. I felt an invisible bond forming between us, something more than just friendship. Reynard taught me to live as a free and bold mistress of his lands, and I sought to heal his wounded heart. But happiness was short-lived. The king's message heralded new trials. Strange disturbances had begun in the neighboring kingdom. Rumors of uprisings and conspiracies circulated. And suddenly I remembered the drawings of my stepson, young Prince Geoffrey. Lately, they depicted strange images. Ravaged lands, burning cities, people in terror. Was it just childish fantasy, or was the boy seeing what we couldn't? My heart clenched with worry. Could I live peacefully when my lands and the entire kingdom were threatened? Would fate once again throw me into a whirlwind of intrigue and danger? The road to the capital was long and exhausting. I rode my horse relentlessly, but anxious thoughts never left me. The meeting with the king did not promise anything pleasant. He always regarded me with suspicion, thinking that I might pose a threat to his rule. Indeed, my independence and willfulness irritated him. I did not want to be a puppet in his hands. I wanted to carve out my own destiny. Finally, I reached the capital. Magnificent palaces, bustling streets, crowds of people. It all seemed alien and hostile to me. I stepped onto the threshold of the royal castle, feeling my heart tighten with anxiety. What awaited me beyond these stone walls? What dangers and intrigues awaited me? The king greeted me with a stony face. His cold eyes pierced me through, and his voice carried barely concealed anger. Lady Leah, he said, you have arrived just in time. We are facing a danger, and I need your help. I raised my head, meeting his cold gaze. What exactly is the danger, Your Majesty? I asked, trying to hide my agitation. The king leaned back on his throne and began to speak. In the neighboring kingdom of Avalonia, a rebellion was spreading. The people, tired of King Richard's harsh rule, had risen up in rebellion. But that wasn't all. Troubling rumors were coming from Avalonia. They spoke of the Black Plague, a deadly disease that spread quickly and defied treatment. As some say this plague is a curse, the king whispered, his voice trembling, that it punishes Richard for his crimes. I clenched my fists. King Richard was known for his cruelty and tyranny. It was no wonder the people had risen against him. But the plague. This threat was far more terrifying than any battle. What exactly do you expect from me, Your Majesty? I asked. The king paused for a moment. I want you to go to Avalonia as an envoy, he declared. You speak with the rebels, try to understand their demands. And most importantly, find out what's happening with this plague. Is it just a disease, or is it truly a curse? I felt my breath catch. The journey to Avalonia was a mission fraught with danger. The rebels might not want to meet with the envoy of their hated king, and the plague could prove deadly. I looked at the king. He avoided my gaze, nervously twisting the ring on his finger. "And what do I get in return, Your Majesty?" I asked. The king frowned, but a sigh escaped his lips. "Full autonomy for your lands," he replied. "You will be the independent ruler of Voman Lutissan, and no one will interfere in your affairs." It was a tempting offer. Independence was what I had craved all my life. But the price seemed too high. Give me time to think," I requested. The king nodded. "You can stay in my castle until you make a decision." I thanked him and left the throne room. My heart was pounding like a trapped bird. The journey to Avalonia was madness, but what if the plague spread to my lands? What if it reached Voman Lutissan and my little Geoffrey? Days in the royal castle passed slowly, each one filled with anxiety and uncertainty. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't train with weapons or manage the affairs of my fortress. My only companion was Geoffrey, whom I had brought with me to the capital. The young prince, unaware of the seriousness of the situation, bombarded me with questions about the shining armor of the royal guards and the grand halls of the palace. I answered him, but my thoughts were elsewhere. One evening, as I stood on the balcony, watching the city life, Lord Edward approached me, one of the king's advisors. "Lady Leah," Lord Edward spoke softly, "I know you bear a heavy burden." I turned to him, slightly surprised by his presence. He wasn't among my close circle of acquaintances. Rather, he always kept his distance. "We are all concerned about the situation in Avalonia," he continued. But the plague. It's a terrible threat." I nodded. The king believes that going there is the best option," Edward said. But I'm not sure he's weighed all the risks." I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you advise, Lord Edward?" He paused for a moment. There are other ways," he finally said. "We could try to contact the rebels in some other manner. Send a spy, for example." Those words intrigued me. The idea of going to Avalonia was becoming increasingly daunting. But will the king agree to this?" I asked. Edward sadly smiled. The king is afraid," he confessed. He fears the rebellion, he fears the plague. And he fears you, Leah." I was surprised. Why does he fear me?" Because you are strong, independent," Edward replied. "You are not like other noblewomen. And he suspects that you may use this situation to your advantage." I clenched my fists. The king and his suspicions. Didn't he see that I just wanted to protect my lands and my people? "Thank you for the information, Lord Edward," I said. "I will definitely take it into account." Edward nodded and left. I was alone on the balcony, looking at the night city. Edward's words gave me hope. Perhaps there is another way to deal with this threat. But will I find support for such a plan in the king and his advisors? Will I have to act alone again, risking my position and perhaps even my life? That night, I couldn't sleep for a long time, weighing all the pros and cons. The journey to Avalonia was dangerous, but inaction could have fatal consequences. At dawn, I made a decision. I will not just be a pawn in the king's game. I will find my own way, protect my lands, and unravel the mystery of Avalonia. But for that, I needed a plan. And perhaps an ally. The next day, I requested an audience with the king. He reluctantly agreed to see me. I entered the throne room, holding my head high. The king sat on his throne, his face grim. "Your Majesty," he began. "I have made a decision." The king raised his head, his eyes watching me warily. "And what is it?" he asked. I took a deep breath. I will not go to Avalonia, I declared. The king almost jumped on the throne. You refuse? But he stottert. I propose another way, I interrupted him. We can try to contact the rebels. I continued, laying out my plan to the king. Instead of risking my life and health with a journey to Avalonia, I suggested sending a spy or diplomat from a neutral country. Such a person could meet with the rebels, learn their demands, and assess the situation with the plague. The king listened to me silently, his face unreadable. When I finished, he remained silent for a long time, as if pondering my words. That's an interesting plan. He finally spoke. But who would agree to such a dangerous mission? I anticipated this question. I know someone, I replied confidently. Someone who has experience with such tasks, someone who can be trusted with this mission. The king raised an eyebrow. And who might that be? I met his gaze. Lord Reynard, I replied firmly. The king frowned. He had always disliked Reynard, considering him a rebel and a threat. Reynard? He repeated. Are you serious? He's the best for this mission. I interrupted the king. He's brave, experienced, and has connections among the rebels. He'll be able to communicate with them. The king pondered. He clearly hesitated. On one hand, my plan was much less risky than a trip to Avalonia. On the other hand, trusting Reynard was difficult. Finally, the king sighed. Fine. He agreed. We'll try your plan. But if Reynard betrays us? He won't betray, I replied firmly. I vouch for him. The king nodded, though distrust still flickered in his eyes. Then prepare him for the mission, he ordered. Let him depart as soon as possible. I thanked the king and left the throne room. My heart was pounding with excitement. The plan was risky, but it was my plan. Now I needed to talk to Reynard. Would he agree to this mission? Could I persuade him to go to Avalonia and unravel its mysteries? And most importantly, could I trust him with my life and the lives of my people? I walked quickly to Reynard's chambers in the royal castle. My boots echoed loudly on the stone floor, reflecting the turmoil in my heart. Reaching his door, I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. The conversation promised to be difficult. Reynard had always been a lone wolf, not obedient to the king's orders, and now he was being offered to perform his mission. Moreover, a mission associated with great danger. Finally, I knocked. From behind the door came his low voice. Come in. I opened the door and saw Reynard sitting by the window, lost in thought. He was dressed casually, not in splendid attire. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, and traces of fatigue were visible on his face. Leah, he exclaimed, rising from his chair. What's happened? I quickly told him about the situation in Avalonia, about the plague and the rebellion, about how the king refused my journey and agreed to an alternative plan. And he wants me to go there. Reynard skeptically asked when I finished. The king, who always saw me as a traitor. He didn't want this, I confessed. But my plan was the only alternative. And what exactly am I supposed to do? He asked, his voice firm. You'll need to contact the rebels, I replied. Find out their demands, assess the situation with the plague, and do everything possible to prevent this disaster from spreading to our lands. Reynard was silent, his gaze directed somewhere beyond the window. I could see he was struggling with inner turmoil. It's a dangerous mission, Leah, he finally spoke. The likelihood that I won't return is very high. I know, I said, approaching him. And I'm not demanding anything from you. Your decision is your business. But then I added, looking him straight in the eyes. But if Avalonia is indeed plagued, it threatens not only the king but all of us. And perhaps it's a chance to avenge the past, for what forced you to flee your homeland?" Reynard clenched his fists. Anger flashed in his eyes. The past, which he disliked talking about, surfaced. We stood silently for some time, each immersed in our own thoughts. Then Reynard sighed. Fine, he said. I'll go. But on one condition." "What?" I asked, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "You'll come with me." I blinked in surprise. "What?" "Otat." But the king won't agree." "We won't ask him," Reynard declared firmly. "This mission is too dangerous to go officially. We'll go as a couple of friends who decided to travel." I widened my eyes in astonishment. "A couple of friends?" I whispered, barely suppressing a smile. "You want to trust this mission to me?" He replied with a crooked grin. "Trust me to the end." Reynard's idea was insane but exciting. To go to Avalonia under the guise of a friendly couple. It was risky, but perhaps the only way to carry out the mission and remain unnoticed. "But I don't have suitable attire," I objected, already feeling a hint of excitement. Reynard waved his hand. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. We leave at dawn tomorrow." The next few hours passed in a feverish frenzy of preparation. Reynard disappeared, and I gathered the necessary items, feeling the excitement pulsing in my blood. Finally, late at night, Reynard returned. He brought 2 sturdy traveling cloaks with hoods and 2 pairs of boots. Additionally, he retrieved 2 dresses from the bag, made of simple yet sturdy fabric. Here, he said, handing them to me. "I hope your wardrobe allows for a little borrowing." I took the dresses and examined them. They were modest but tailored to conceal the figure. "Where did you get these?" I asked. Reynard smiled mysteriously. "I have my connections." "Get dressed, Leah. It's time." Quickly changing, I felt like a completely different person. The proud Duchess of Voman-Lutissen vanished, replaced by a simple woman ready for a dangerous journey. We left Reynard's room, moving cautiously, as if we were thieves. The castle slept, and the corridors were empty. "Where are the horses?" I whispered. "They're waiting for us outside the city walls," Reynard replied. "No one will see us there." We crept through the dark castle, avoiding guards and patrols. My heart pounded like a bird in a cage. Finally, we reached the old stables outside the castle walls. 2 saddled horses awaited us. Quickly, Reynard said, helping me onto the horse. He mounted his own steed, and we rode away from the capital, disappearing into the darkness like ghosts. I glanced back. The majestic castle walls disappeared from view. We galloped ahead, towards the unknown, towards a country engulfed in rebellion and plague. I didn't know what awaited us in Avalonia, but I felt that this journey would change everything. It would change me, change my relationship with Reynard, change the fate of my lands. And perhaps, there, on foreign soil, I would find answers to the questions that had long plagued me. Answers about my past, about my place in this world, and about the feelings that had been growing stronger in my heart for this grim yet brave man riding beside me. We rode for several days, avoiding main roads and using lesser-known paths. Reynard proved to be an excellent guide, well-versed in these lands. He told me about the history of Avalonia, about its people, and their difficult fate under the rule of the cruel King Richard. Gradually, we began to adapt to the role of a married couple. It was awkward at first, but with each mile traveled, the discomfort faded. We learned to keep up conversation, playing the role of a loving couple. At night, we slept under the open sky, huddled close to a small fire. The starry sky was the only witness to our conversations, which no longer only concerned the mission. We told each other about our past, about dreams and fears. I learned about Reynard's harsh life in Avalonia, about his family's suffering under King Richard's rule. It opened his heart, made him more vulnerable. In turn, he listened to my story of life in captivity under Count de Montague, of my struggle for independence. With each passing day, trust and an inexplicable bond grew between us. His warm, penetrating gaze made my heart beat faster. Finally, the day came when we reached the border between the kingdoms. The atmosphere here was tense. Avalonian guards, armed and suspicious, scrutinized everyone carefully. Approaching the gates, nervously gripping the reins, Reynard confidently spun a tale of us, a married couple visiting relatives in Avalonia. The guards were stern, but eventually let us through. We entered Avalonian territory. The land looked different here, bleaker, as if reflecting the grim plight of its inhabitants. Villages were semi-ruined, people's faces were grim. The rebellion is clearly gaining momentum, Reynard murmured quietly. I nodded. We witnessed this firsthand, passing through several villages where people openly revolted against the authorities. A sense of danger constantly surrounded us. But we couldn't turn back. We had to find the rebels, talk to them, learn about the plague, and relay this information back to our lands. Suddenly, a contingent of Avalonian soldiers appeared on the path. They stopped us, eyeing us suspiciously. Documents. Their commander barked roughly. Reynard reacted swiftly, producing forged papers from his pocket. We're a couple from Tauntonville, visiting relatives in the southern regions, he declared confidently. The soldiers exchanged looks, their faces displeased. Show what you're carrying, the commander ordered. We opened our travel bags, revealing ordinary items that didn't arouse suspicion. For a long time, the soldiers scrutinized us and our luggage. Finally, their commander seemed to relax slightly. Go on, he grumbled. But don't linger. We nodded and quickly moved forward, feeling relief mixed with apprehension. This encounter showed that navigating Avalonia would not be easy at all. We needed to be cautious, not draw unnecessary attention to ourselves. We continued to travel through Avalonia, trying to avoid main roads and patrols. Reynard, thanks to his past, knew several secret paths and abandoned trails that allowed us to move faster and safer. The mood in the country was tense. It felt like the rebellion was hanging in the air, like a storm ready to break. Ruined villages, dilapidated houses, and grim faces of the people, all testified to the harsh life under King Richard's rule. We tried to discreetly question the local residents about the rebels, avoiding suspicion. Mostly, people were secretive, afraid to speak out. But some managed to share a few things with us. The gathered information painted a picture of a beleaguered king and his cruel laws. The people were tired of tyranny and poverty. The rebels were gaining strength, their army growing with each passing day. However, no one had heard anything specific about the plague. Some said it was a fabrication concocted by the king to frighten the people. Others whispered about a terrible disease spreading in the southern regions of the country. These conflicting pieces of information troubled us. Did the plague really exist, or was it just propaganda? And if it was real, how serious was this threat? Finally, after a week of travel, we got lucky. Stopping for the night in a small forest, we met an old man who, as it turned out, sympathized with the rebels. He told us about their camp nearby, in a remote mountainous area. It was great news. Finally, we could make contact with the rebels, learn about their plans, and get to the bottom of the plague. However, the old man warned us of the danger. The rebels were armed and suspicious of strangers. He advised us to approach the camp openly, but to be cautious in our words and actions. The next day, filled with determination and nervousness, We set off towards the mountains, knowing that this meeting could determine the fate of our mission. The journey to the mountain rebel camp was long and arduous. The road twisted and turned, leading us through dense forests and rocky ravines. Tension mounted with each step. We knew we were approaching the heart of the rebellion, and we didn't know how we would be received there. Finally, after several hours of riding, we saw smoke in the distance, a clear sign of the camp. My heart pounded in my chest like a bird in a cage. We halted our horses at a safe distance and looked around. The camp was situated on a mountain plateau, surrounded by natural defenses. Tents dotted the area, with people bustling about. Some were armed with swords and bows, their faces stern and resolute. "Are ready?" Reynard asked, his voice serious. I took a deep breath. "Are ready," I replied, though everything inside me was trembling. We advanced, trying to look confident. As we neared the camp, a burly man with a thick beard and a stern gaze approached us. He was dressed in leather armor and armed with a sword. Who are you, and what do you want on our land?" he asked gruffly. Reynard quickly dismounted and raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. "We're supporters of the rebellion," he declared. "We've come from afar to join your fight against the tyranny of King Richard." The bearded man eyed us skeptically. "And where did you noble folks come from?" he asked distrustfully. We understood his suspicion. We, dressed in ordinary attire, didn't look like hardened rebels. "We're from Tauntonville," I replied, using our cover story. "We've seen what's happening in Avalonia and couldn't stand idly by." The bearded man didn't take his eyes off us. He seemed to be weighing our words. "Wait here," he finally said. "I'll inform our leader about you." He turned and walked towards one of the largest tents in the center of the camp. We stood there under the watchful eyes of the rebels. Minutes passed slowly, filled with tension. Finally, another man emerged from the tent. He was older, with gray hair and noble features. Though his gaze was stern, it was calmer than the bearded man's. "You said you want to join the rebellion?" as he asked. "Yes," Reynard replied. "We want to help fight against King Richard's tyranny." "And what can you offer?" the rebel leader continued. Reynard told him about his past in Avalonia, about the injustices he suffered under the king. He also mentioned his military skills and experience. As for me, I spoke about my lands, which also suffered under the king's oppression, and how we wanted to assist the rebels not only with weapons but also with information. The leader listened attentively. Then he paused for a long time, as if considering our words. Finally, he spoke. We always welcome those who are willing to fight. We always welcome those who are willing to fight for freedom," the rebel leader continued. But first, we need to verify your words. Tell me, what have you heard about the plague rumored to have struck the southern lands of Avalonia?" There it was. The question that had been weighing on us. "We've heard various stories," I replied cautiously. "As some say it's a fabrication invented by the king to scare the people. Others whisper about a terrible disease spreading in the south." The leader nodded. "We've received conflicting information as well. Some of our people managed to infiltrate the south, but their reports were vague. The disease exists, that's for sure, but how serious it is and how quickly it spreads, we don't know." I shared with him the information we received from the king and my own speculations. Reynard added his observations about the condition of the Avalonian villages we passed through. The leader listened to us carefully, and it seemed like his expression softened slightly. "You've brought valuable information," he finally acknowledged. "Perhaps you can indeed be useful to us." He turned to the bearded man. "Give them a place in the camp and weapons if they desire. But keep an eye on them until we're certain of their loyalty." The bearded man nodded and led us to one of the tents. The tension eased slightly, but we understood that trust had not yet been earned. We needed to prove our loyalty to the rebels and help them in their fight against tyranny. We settled into the camp, learning the ways of the rebels. Reynard quickly found common ground with the local warriors, sharing his military knowledge. Meanwhile, I tried to communicate with the women and children, learning more about life under King Richard's oppression. But the most important task was to uncover the truth about the plague. We searched for people who had seen it with their own eyes or who could infiltrate the south and bring back more reliable information. Days were spent in training and conversations, and evenings around the campfire, listening to stories of struggle and dreams of a free Avalonia. With each passing day, our understanding of the situation deepened, and our bond with the rebels grew stronger. One evening, as we sat by the fire, the rebel leader approached us. His face was troubled. "We've received new reports from the south," he informed us. The situation is serious. The plague is spreading faster than we thought." Our hearts sank. This news changed everything. Now, the fight against King Richard was pushed to the background. The main threat became the dreadful disease, which could destroy not only Avalonia but also spread to our lands. The news of the rapid spread of the plague hung in the air like a thundercloud. Worry creased the faces of the rebels. Even the campfire, which had once crackled cheerfully, seemed to have lost its warmth. What should we do?" Finally broke the silence one of the rebels. "We can't just sit here and wait for the disease to reach us," added a woman, her voice trembling. The leader remained silent, his eyes scanning the faces of his people. He knew that a decision needed to be made quickly, and it would be a difficult one. "We need more information," he finally spoke. "Someone needs to go deeper into the south, closer to the epicenter of the plague." Silence fell over the camp. No one was eager to undertake this dangerous mission. The risk of infection and death was very high. I exchanged a glance with Reynard. We both understood that someone had to take on this responsibility. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do anything to protect our countries from the terrible disease. "I'll go," Reynard stated quietly but firmly. Surprised cries echoed through the camp. "No, it's too dangerous," the leader objected. "But someone has to do it," Reynard insisted. "I know these lands. I can survive where others might not." He looked at me, and I saw not only determination but also concern in his eyes. He knew it was a risky mission, but he also knew I wouldn't be able to refuse him. "I can go with him," I said, looking at the leader. "Together, we'll have a better chance of surviving and gathering the necessary information." Silence fell over the camp again. The leader looked at us for a long time, weighing our words. Then he nodded. Very well," he said. But be careful. And remember, the fate of not only Avalonia but also your lands depends on your mission." We knew he was right. This mission was much more dangerous than the journey to Avalonia. We were risking not only our lives but also the lives of everyone dear to us. The next few days were spent in preparation. We stocked up on food, water, and medicines that could help if we fell ill. We were also provided with a local guide who knew the southern lands and could lead us through dangerous areas. Finally, the day came for us to set out. The farewells with the rebels, who had become almost like family to us, were emotional. We hugged, exchanged wishes for success, and promised to return. As we rode away from the camp, I looked back. Already, the smoke from the campfire was barely visible on the horizon. We were heading into the unknown, carrying the burden of responsibility for the fate of many people on our shoulders. Ahead lay a difficult road, full of danger and fear. But we were together, and that gave us strength. We knew we had to fulfill our mission to stop the plague and save our lands. Led by their guide, Leah and Reynard stepped onto the sun-drenched soil of southern Avalonia. The wind carried with it the unpleasant smell of decay, and dark clouds of smoke loomed on the horizon. Every step was heavy for them. Their hearts clenched with fear of the unknown, and their bodies ached with exhaustion. The guide, grim and silent, led the way, guiding them through thickets of thorny bushes and gloomy ravines. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a piercing scream. From behind a hill, a flock of black crows flew out, cawing and circling over something on the ground. Leah's heart tightened. She remembered hearing about these scavengers that fed on the corpses of plague victims. "Eat faster," Reynard whispered, grabbing her hand. They dashed forward, trying to hide behind a rocky outcrop. Looking back, they saw a horrifying sight. On the ground lay the corpse of a man, his face contorted in a grimace of pain, his body covered in dark spots. Leah turned away, unable to suppress her nausea. She had never seen anything like it. "It's the plague," Reynard whispered, his voice hoarse with horror. "We must be careful." They continued on their way, feeling the cold grip of fear constricting their hearts. Every shadow seemed like a predator, every sound a harbinger of death. Finally, after hours of exhausting travel, they reached a small village. The village was almost empty. They were greeted only by solitary figures, worn down by disease and grief. Leah and Reynard went from house to house, trying to gather information about the plague. They listened to stories of horrific symptoms, of swift death, of entire families disappearing in a matter of days. With each story, their hearts clenched tighter with horror. They understood that the plague was not just a myth, but a terrifying reality threatening not only Avalonia, but also their own lands. Emotionally and physically exhausted, Leah and Reynard decided to stop for the night in one of the empty houses. Sitting by the fire, they silently watched the dancing tongues of flame. "What are we going to do?" Leah finally asked, her voice trembling. Reynard sighed. "We must return and tell the rebels the truth," he replied, his voice firm but his eyes betraying fear and sorrow. "The longer we stay here, the greater the risk of infection." Leah nodded, her face pale. She understood his reasoning. They couldn't risk futile death, as the lives of many people depended on their knowledge. But what if they don't let us back into the camp?" she asked, voicing her concern. "They don't know if we're infected." Reynard gently stroked her hand in a reassuring gesture. "We'll figure something out," he said confidently. "The main thing is to get back to the camp alive and deliver the information." They lay down to sleep, but sleep eluded them. Nightmares of ravaged villages and dark figures, stricken by disease, kept them awake. The next morning, they set out on the road back. The journey back seemed even harder. They constantly looked around, afraid of encountering sick people or wild animals scavenging on the outskirts of villages. Food and water were running out, fatigue was taking its toll. But the thought of the responsibility resting on their shoulders drove them forward. Finally, after several days of exhausting travel, they saw the familiar silhouette of the mountains in the distance, where the rebels' camp was located. Joy mingled with anxiety. Would they be able to overcome the final stretch of the journey and warn of the danger? Approaching the camp, Leah and Reynard saw that there were significantly more armed guards at the entrance. They were wearing masks made of fabric soaked with some herbs. Tension could be felt even from a distance. Not reaching the camp, the heroes stopped. They realized they might not be allowed in, or worse, mistaken for infected. What do we do?" whispered Leah, her voice trembling with excitement and fatigue. Reynard dismounted and rummaged in his bag. He pulled out a small bell, similar to the ones used by traders. Then he raised it high above his head and rang it vigorously several times. The sound caught the attention of the guards. They approached cautiously, not lowering their weapons. We're the ones who came before, Reynard shouted. We've returned from the south with important information for your leader. The guards exchanged glances. One of them stepped closer and sniffed. We don't sense the plague on you, he finally said. But nevertheless, you'll have to undergo an examination. The next few hours were a true trial for Leah and Reynard. They were thoroughly examined by the camp doctors, treated with special herbs, and kept in a separate room under observation. Finally, they were allowed to meet with the leader of the rebels. They entered his tent, dirty and tired, but with a fire of determination in their eyes. We've found what we were looking for, Reynard declared, wasting no time. And then they told the leader everything they had seen and heard in the south. They described the ravaged villages, the horrific symptoms of the disease, and the speed of its spread. The leader listened attentively, his face grim. This is terrible news, he finally said. But thank you for risking your lives to bring it to us. Now the rebels faced a difficult task. They understood that the plague was an enemy no less dangerous than King Richard. We need to act quickly, the leader announced, addressing his advisors who had gathered in the tent. We must warn all surrounding villages and towns of the danger and take security measures. The following days and weeks in the rebel camp were tumultuous. They prepared to fight the new threat. Doctors made medicines from herbs rumored to help the sick. Craftsmen sewed protective suits for those who would have to care for the infected. Leah and Reynard became heroes of the camp. Their courage and selflessness were respected by all. But along with this, they bore a heavy burden. They knew that ahead of them lay a tough battle, as stopping the plague would be much more difficult than defeating the king. The hard battle against the plague lasted for many months. Leah and Reynard, risking their lives, saved people, cared for the sick, and shared their knowledge and experience. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger. They supported each other in the toughest moments, sharing their fears and dreams. Leah admired Reynard, his bravery, determination, and ability to find a way out of any situation. Reynard, in turn, was enchanted by Leah, her kindness, compassion, and strength of spirit. One evening, when the plague finally began to recede, and long-awaited peace reigned in the camp, Reynard invited Leah for a walk. They walked through a picturesque valley, where the first spring flowers had already bloomed. We've been through so much, Reynard said, stopping and looking at Leah. I never thought I could endure it. But we did, Leah replied, her eyes shining with happy light. And we did it together. Reynard approached her and gently took her hand. Leah, he said, his voice soft and trembling. You're the most wonderful woman I've ever met. You're strong, brave, kind. You saved not only me but also the lives of many people. Leah felt her heart beat faster. Reynard, she whispered. I feel something for you too. You've become more to me than just a friend. Reynard smiled and gently kissed her. It was a tender, trembling kiss that filled their hearts with warmth and happiness. They stood there, embracing, under the evening sky, pierced by the first stars. They knew that ahead of them lay many trials, but they also knew that they could overcome everything together. Because they loved each other, and this love gave them the strength to move forward, to do good, and to change the world for the better. Thank you for being with us today. I hope that this story has brought you emotions. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and click on the bell so you don't miss any of our new stories. Thank you for your support. You are the best.